Hello there, and welcome to this webinar. Now, the purpose of this webinar is to essentially bring you up to speed with everything that you need to understand and be able to perform in terms of actions and skills for the assessment workbook for the TAE Language Literacy and Numeracy 411 unit. Okay, and it is my absolute pleasure to bring this webinar to you on behalf of Success Training Academy and Healthy Business Training Academy. All right, so the Language Literacy and Numeracy unit is a unit that you'll probably go through as part of your full course with Success Training Academy, or you may do it as part of your upgrade course. And that upgrade course is what's required in order to bridge your TAE 40110 up to TAE 40116. So essentially the purpose of this webinar is to give you a good solid understanding and an ability to answer the projects that are going to be found in this assessment workbook. Okay, now just to give you some perspective, essentially the Language Literacy and Numeracy unit, you're going to find all of the assessment contained in this assessment workbook, and I highly recommend that you definitely listen to this webinar a couple of times to make sure that you've captured all the key information. Before we go into the assessment workbook in too much detail, I will give you a very basic overview of language literacy and numeracy and the Australian Core Skills Framework. But essentially, the purpose of this webinar is to give you a full rundown of the entire assessment workbook so that you know exactly how to approach each and every question. And I'll probably give you some very strong hints as to how to approach the questions as well. Okay, so definitely have a notebook handy as we go through this webinar and be taking lots of notes. All right, so when you enroll for the course, you will probably receive a assessment workbook just like this. So the first thing you definitely want to do is put in your name and obviously, as it says, please print. Training location, it could be online or it could be at one of the many training locations that Success Training Academy has. So it could be Southport, it could be Brisbane, it could be Sydney, it could be Melbourne, wherever you may end up doing the course. Trainer's name, put that in if you know it. If you don't, just leave that blank. Date of course commenced, put in the date that you enrolled in the course. Okay, so coming down, you can read through this information, and basically it's just the instructions for the course and how to submit your assessments. Okay, cover sheet and agreement, definitely put your name in there, sign it and put the date. Okay, and you can leave this section blank for now. Okay, so coming down a bit further, learner's name, put your name in there, and the rest of this part you can leave blank. Okay, so that information is just about version control and things like that. Now, this assessment workbook is made up of both written questions and practical assessment activities. Now, before we go into the actual short answer questions, what I want to quickly do is just run you through some very basic things about language literacy and numeracy and how you would approach this, this unit in terms of some concepts and give you some very basic understanding of the different levels that you will find in language literacy and numeracy, and essentially how that all comes together in the Australian AQF, the Australian Qualifications Framework. So let's take a look at one of my most favourite charts to look at. Okay, this is a very basic summary of the Australian Core Skills Framework. To give you some history, back in 2011, there was a report done. It was called No More Excuses. And they found at that time that there was some significant gaps in language literacy and numeracy within Australia. They discovered that 53% of people in Australia had problems with numeracy. 46% of people in Australia had challenges with reading. And 13% of people in Australia had challenges with writing. Okay, those numbers were certainly a little bit shocking and scary numbers, and from that report called No More Excuses, there was a book put out called the Australian Core Skills Framework, and you can Google the ACSF and you can see the entire document at your leisure. But I just wanted to show you a summary of the Australian Core Skills Framework. So they looked at language literacy and numeracy skills, and they were able to compartmentalize it into 5 core skills: learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy. And what they did is they broke it down into levels. So they said for learning, we've got level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And Reading 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay. Writing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Oral communication 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Numeracy 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. What we need to appreciate is that level 1 is going to be very, very, very simplistic and very basic. Okay. And then we've got level 5, which is very complex. And this level, what we need to understand is that not every single person as a native speaker is going to be a level 5 for every one of the core skills. So just because you may be a native speaker of English, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a 4 or a 5 for everything. Okay. So what we need to understand is that when we are dealing with students, they are going to fall in a range across the ACSF. So you may have a student that's got level 3 learning, level 2 reading, level 4 writing, level 2 oral communication, and maybe level 3 numeracy. Okay, and every single student's going to have a slightly different profile. So just to give you some understanding and some awareness about how these levels play out and the different distinctions, I'm going to do an example and I'm going to do a bit of an analysis on myself. So for me, I'm not very good with numbers. I didn't really like studying numeracy and maths in high school. And for me, I'm probably going to put myself at around a level 3 for numeracy, okay? I'm not fantastic at algebra, definitely not. I could even fall into the level 2 occasionally. I sometimes screw up my timesheet, so probably I'm going to put myself at around a 2 or a 3 for numeracy. Oral communication, I'm probably going to put myself at around a 4 or a 5. I'm not a 5 because I really don't enjoy negotiating complex problematic exchanges. That's really not my cup of tea, okay? Writing. I'm probably going to put myself at around a 4 or a 5 for writing because in the past I have done my master's in applied linguistics and for me, I'm quite comfortable writing extended prose and complicated documents. Reading, I'm probably going to put myself at around a 4 or a 5 for reading. Probably not a 5, okay, because I don't like to read, what have we got here, read legislation and things like that. That's really not my cup of tea, okay? But learning. Now, learning is your ability to manage your time and resources to get a learning outcome. So what I mean by that is how much can you set goals? How much can you future plan? How much can you review your own skills and knowledge and your own weaknesses? And how much can you take initiative, okay? And ultimately learning is how much can you operate by yourself and not have to lean on other people. Also, how well can you handle unfamiliar situations? So for me, I'm probably going to put myself at around a 4 or a 5 for learning, okay? So what I encourage you to do is go ahead and do the same thing for yourself. What would you give yourself for numeracy? What would you give yourself for oral communication, writing, reading, and learning? From this, it is a great exercise to really get a sense of what kind of levels could you expect a student to be able to perform if you were teaching a particular course, okay? So part of language literacy and numeracy is twofold. We need to understand a level that would be required for a unit of competency that we may be teaching. And we also need to understand what level a student may be. And essentially we need to be able to support the gap between what the student may be and what the course may require. And we can do that through a number of different strategies that we may employ or apply in the actual training room that we have, okay? Ultimately though, we need to appreciate that we're not trying to teach anyone to read or write and do numbers. All we are trying to do as LLN qualified TAE holders is essentially be able to deal with any shortfalls between what the course may require and what the student may be, okay? And we would give them tests in order to discover what levels they may be on the Australian Core Skills Framework. But ultimately, our job is to just bridge the gap. And if we can't bridge the gap fully, then we can send them off to an LLN specialist, if that makes sense. So another thing that we need to think about is for particular jobs, what may be the minimum requirements that somebody may have in order to survive a particular occupation. So let me just run through a couple of examples for you. So if we take, for example, a taxi driver, Now, a taxi driver, probably on the learning level, we could maybe say that they're probably going to need to be around a 3, okay? 3 for learning for a taxi driver. Now, a taxi driver probably doesn't need to read that much, so I'm going to feel that they will probably be okay with a reading level 2. Writing, probably, I'm going to say around a 2 again. Oral communication, well, let's say around 2 or a 3. Numeracy, probably around a 2 or a 3 again, okay? Let's pick another occupation. Now, I'm not saying that any of these occupations are better than another. What I am saying is that for a particular occupation, you may need higher or lower levels of language literacy and numeracy across these 5 core skills. So let's go an accountant. All right, an accountant, probably I'm going to say around a 4, okay, for learning. Reading, I'm probably going to say around a 4. Writing, I might say around a 4. Yeah, definitely a 4 for writing. Oral communication, I reckon we could drop down to a 3, possibly a 4. And numeracy. Numeracy, although I'm saying an accountant, I'm not going to say that they actually need a 5. They could even be a 3 or a 4. Now, if we were talking about a tax accountant, definitely we would want to have high levels of learning, high levels of reading and writing. Oral communication could be, again, a 4 or a 5. And with numeracy, even though it's a tax accountant, the numeracy levels are not going to change that very much. So I'm still going to say around a 4 for numeracy, maybe a 3 or a 4. All right, let's pick another job. Let's say a plumber, okay? Let's say a plumber that's an apprentice for somebody else, okay? So a plumber, I'm probably going to say around a 3, okay? Maybe even a 4 for learning. All right, reading, I'm probably going to say around a 3. Yeah, probably around a 2 or a 3, all right? Writing, I'm probably going to say 3. Oral communication, I'm probably going to say around 2 or a 3. Numeracy, well, for a plumber, they actually need to do some quite complex calculations. So I'm going to say around a 3, possibly a 4, but more so 3, I'd say. I'd feel comfortable assigning a 3 for that. Okay, so just to recap. Back in 2011, there was a report done. It was called No More Excuses. And the government really understood how bad the levels of language literacy and numeracy were in Australia. And from that, they developed a benchmarking system, and it was called the Australian Core Skills Framework. If you want to Google the actual book and download it and have a look at it in further detail, feel free to do so, and I highly encourage you to do so. That's just the Australian Core Skills Framework, and you'll be able to Google that quite easily. Now, based on the Australian Core Skills Framework, there's 2 things that we can do. We can identify what would the course level be. We can then also give a test to the student, and we can identify what level a student may be in each of the different core skills, okay? Then from that, we can then create a plan on how we can support the students and bridge the gap so that they can travel through our training and assessment successfully, and they can travel through the workplace successfully and perform their job role, okay? So now that we've got that understanding, let's head back to the assessment workbook. Let's head back to the assessment workbook. I'm just going to bring it up for us. All right. Now, some of the things that we go through with the assessment workbook, you will actually be able to Google and find the answers quite easily. Other things I'm going to give you some strong prompters and hints with, but ultimately, this is not really a book that you're going to need to do very extensive research on, and you may not even need to access the textbook for it. Okay, so there's a number of short answer questions that I'm going to go through with you and help you out as much as I can. Okay, so if we take a look at the very first question that we've got here, hopefully, based on that chart, you would be able to answer this first question here. According to the ACSF, what are the 5 LLN skills? Okay, so without giving away the answer, give it away now. All right, without giving away the answer, I'm just going to show you that and do that. Okay, I'm hoping you're getting the hint. Okay, so now we're going to come down. Compare the following 2 spiky profile reports provided. Okay, the first belongs to a learner named Mary Louise. The second illustrates the core requirements for the unit from the Cert 3 in Early Childhood Education and Care. Okay, so if we take a look here, we've got the results for Mary Louise, and then we've got the results for the unit Provide Care for Children. So if we take a look here with learning, is there a gap between what Mary Louise is and what the unit itself requires? Well, probably hint, hint, nudge, nudge, they're both 4. So I'm going to say there's not really a gap there, okay? But reading, can we see that there's a little bit of a gap there? She is a 2, but the course requires a 4, okay? Now, she's a 2 for writing, but the course requires a 4. Okay, oral communication, is there any gap? 5, 4. Okay, and then we've got numeracy, 2 and 2. Okay, so the question is asking, if Mary Louise wanted to work in this field, what LLN's core skills would require for support for her? Okay, so hint, hint, nudge, nudge, notice the gaps, okay, and you may find that these would be the areas that she may need some extra support in, if that makes sense. And maybe I'm hoping that you've even discovered the typo on this actual graph. Let's see if anyone picks up the typo on this graph, okay? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, all right? So this question's asking you, in order for Mary Louise to successfully work in this particular area of work, what core skills does she need support in, okay? So hopefully you've caught the answer on that one. Okay, where might you look for expert support in help providing this support for her? One different resource place for each LLN skill gap identified. Okay, so we might say, okay, we might say, okay, and we might then think about, okay, on the internet, what are some places that she could go to get extra support for her reading? What are some extra support places that she could go to for her support with her writing? Now, these could also be internally inside her company. These could also be at a local TAFE. These could be local English schools. There could be a number of different things. It could even be family members. It could be electronic resources, all those different things that come to mind, okay? So, coming down, practical activity 3. In the box next to the core skill, for an accountant, office manager, and your current role, what level of skill would be required, do you think? Okay, so we've got 1 to 5. Now this question essentially is asking you to think about, within the role of an accountant, what would be the most important core skill? Okay, so now the most important, probably hint, hint, nudge, nudge, let me do the first one for you, would probably be numeracy, and we're going to put a 5 in there, okay? What do you think would be the next most important? Well, probably I'm going to say reading, so we're going to go 5, then we're going to go 4. Probably the next most important would be writing, so we're going to put a 3 there. Next, I'm going to put a 2 for learning, and then least of all would be important, number 1, okay? So we're just doing it in the order of priority, okay? So next one, office manager, okay? So probably the most important for an office manager would probably be communication. So I'm going to put a 5 in that, okay? Now, the rest is up to you. So just think about what would be the next least important and next most least important, okay? So you've got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 in order of priority. Now, next, your own role. Please identify your own role. Okay, let's just pick a random one, such as a nurse. So probably a nurse, I'm going to say one of the most important things probably for a nurse will be learning. So I'm going to go 5. Next, I'm going to go maybe numeracy 4. Next, communication 3. Next 2, and finally writing 1. okay? Now, think about your job role and think about what would be the most important core skill to the least important. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, so we're going to come down here. Next, practical activity 4. Now, this task is going to simulate you looking at a unit of competency and actually identifying key things called trigger words. Trigger words. And the question's asking you to select 10 trigger words. And these are words that are going to help us identify what could be the core skill level for that unit. Now, in this particular case, we have the unit organized meetings. Okay, so it's BSB ADM 405, organized meetings. Okay. Ultimately, what we're typically going to find is that the majority of trigger words are verbs. Okay, the majority of trigger words are verbs, and they're going to be a verb plus a noun. So let's run some examples. So if we looked at 1.1, identify the type of meeting being organized and its purpose. Well, probably identify type of meeting. What we want to do is underline identify type of meeting. Okay, that's going to be one of our first trigger words. Okay, and in total we want to find 10. Okay, next one, identify and comply with any legal or ethical requirements. So I would probably underline comply with legal requirements. Okay, next one, 1.3, I'm going to identify requirements of meeting. Okay, 1.4, I'm going to underline make meeting arrangements. 1.5, I'm going to underline advise participants. 2.1, I'm going to underline prepare notice. 2.2, I'm going to underline check documentation. 2.3, I'm going to underline distribute documentation. 2.4, I'm going to underline prepare spare set. 3.1, I'm going to underline take notes. 3.2, I'm going to underline produce minutes. 3.3, I'm going to underline check minutes. 3.4, I'm going to underline dispatch copies. Okay, so hopefully as I've gone through that, you've done a similar thing, you've underlined the keywords, right? Now, whether you work on this electronic or you work on it hard copy, handwritten, it doesn't matter at all, okay? But let's go to 1.1, identify type of meeting. So let's pose the question, identify type of meeting. Would that be more of a learning thing or a reading or a writing or an oral communication or a numeracy type activity? Identify type of meeting. Probably, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, identify type of meeting is probably going to be a learning activity. All right, what you're going to do, you're going to look at the next one, identify, comply with legal requirements. Identify, comply with legal requirements. Well, that could possibly be a reading word. It could possibly also be an oral communication word. Totally up to you. Totally up to you. Okay, so you're going to go through and each of the words that you underlined, you're going to put in the appropriate box in your opinion. Okay, so let's take a very simple one, take notes. I'm hoping that you can all imagine the verb of take notes, the phrasal verb. Take notes would probably be a writing word. Okay, so you're going to put in take notes, you're going to put in the words take notes in this box. Okay, and you're going to allocate all of the underlined words into one of the boxes. Yes, they can go into multiple boxes, but they just must go into one of the boxes, if that makes sense. Okay, so coming down next, C, based on the information above, what level would be required as a minimum in each of the core skills to undertake the unit or the course itself? So based on the words that we've put in here, you're going to have a look at those words and you're going to judge what would it be for learning. Would it be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Reading. Okay, we need to organize a meeting. Do we need reading level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? And writing 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. And you may come back to this chart and you might correlate it back to here. There is absolutely no right or wrong answers at all. Okay, but just have a think about, even just using your own common sense, writing, organizing a meeting. Would that be 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? Okay, oral communication, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Numeracy, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Okay, so practical activity 5 lists 3 methods that could be used to determine a learner's LLN skills. So Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Well, you could probably do some pre-course testing, and that could be in the form of an interview. You could also do it via a written test with validated tools. Okay. Third thing is that you could do some online testing. Another way you could do it would be some informal observation at the workplace. Another way you could do it would be to speak to their current employer. Okay, so there's quite a few different ideas that you could put in practical activity 5 there. Okay, now, next one. B, suggest methods and identify related sources of support for those with identified issues. Okay, so let me just translate the question for you. So essentially the question's asking you, how could you support people with LLN challenges? Okay, so one method could be, let's say, online tutorials. Okay, sources. Put in the name of a couple of websites. Okay, method. Let's say government organizations or government support groups. Sources, reading and writing hotline. Okay, method, another one could be local English as a second language school. Okay, source, put in the name of a English as a second language school that's close by. Method, LLN specialist. Source, find a language literacy and numeracy specialist that's in your area and pop their name in. Okay, so I'm hoping that's made sense for you. All right. Practical activity 6A, Romeo. Okay, now Romeo has applied for a job in a retail outlet. The role for which he has applied involves speaking with customers, processing telephone orders, doing the banking, giving correct change. Okay, so you can look at this scenario in a little bit more detail, read through it. Okay, now Romeo has filled out a self-assessment checklist. Okay, now looking at this self-assessment checklist, we need to identify if there are gaps and which of the core skills could have gaps in them. Okay, so if we just take a look here, it says add up the prices of things in my head. Oh, he's ticked no for those. He's also ticked no for order supplies from a list. Okay, so probably I'm going to say, yeah, he's definitely got some issues with numeracy. Okay, now let's see. He can use a calculator, but I'm still going to tick that box, right? Know roughly how tall I am in centimeters. Yeah, I'm still going to say numeracy's got an issue. Make a guess of weight of articles. Use a map to find a place, okay? Look up a number in a telephone book on the internet. Okay, so his learning could be okay. But take a phone message and write it down accurately. He's saying no for that. So I'm probably going to say that he needs support with oral communication. Filling in a form, he said he's not confident with that. So again, I'm going to say he needs help with writing as well. So I'm hoping that you can get a sense of what the question's asking you for here, all right? And go ahead and read through learning, reading, writing, oral communication, numeracy, and tick the box that you think he would require extra support on, if that makes sense, okay? So, coming down further, practical activity 6B. Romeo obviously requires some help to improve his performance in specific LLN core skills. Which of the following, which of the LLN assistants listed below, tick the box of which you would be most appropriate, which you think would be most appropriate aiding Romeo and his employers to increase his capabilities in these areas. So we've got specialist in-house support services, specialist consultants, team teaching approaches, mentoring, government and community support services. Now you can pick any of these, there's no right or wrong at all, and you can probably pick more than one, that's totally fine, okay? But you may even want to put them in an order of you thinking which would be the most appropriate, okay? Now, next, select one of the suggested core LLN support services listed above and describe the evidence that you would gather to confirm that fact this type of LLN assistance would help the Romeo. Okay, good typo there. So what you want to do is you want to say, okay, I think that mentoring in the workplace would be the very best option for him, okay? And you could say, in order to identify mentoring as the best way to do it, I would look up the records of other people that the mentors have worked with, and I would make sure that this had been a successful approach in the past. Okay, specialist consultants, I would do my due diligence on each of the consultants that we looked at using, and I would make sure that they had evidence of success in the past and working with people such as Romeo. Okay. Specialist in-house support services, I would look to see what kind of people have they worked with in the past, how effective has it been, all those different kinds of things. Okay. So, moving on to practical activity 6. Okay, the following is an extract of a procedure for balancing a cash register taken from Romeo's employer. It's a learning resource from their training package for new employees. Okay, so the question's basically asking you to read through that and then list a minimum of 4 ways you will customize this resource for Romeo such that his LLN needs are met. Okay, so you're going to come back here and think, how could we adjust this or customize it so that it's even simpler for Romeo to work through? Okay, so number 1, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. It could be put some pictures into it, make some diagrams. It could be simplify the language. It could be make a poster out of it. It could be make a video out of it. It could be put a glossary with it. All those different ways that you could customize this very heavy text document, if that makes sense. Okay, so work through A there for you. All right. Now, B, explain how you would use this tool to assist Romeo in his duties. So it could be things like we will put the poster up near the register. It could be we will run Romeo through it each morning. It could be we will get him to explain it back to us. Okay, all those different things. Okay. Practical activity 7. All right, Ijun is an ESL worker from South Korea. He is an excellent worker with a sound grasp of the English language, but struggles in making himself understood. As a matter of fact, he has even been reporting being laughed at by native co-workers for demonstrating non-native-like pronunciation. Okay, certainly not a good situation for good old Ijun to be in there. All right, but basically it has here some suggested strategies that could be useful for working with Ijun and helping him out. Okay, so you're going to read through the strategies and then you're going to propose the best strategy that you think would help Ijun the most. Okay, so hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Best way to do it is probably to label these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, then what you could do is in here you could put in the strategy that I recommend the most for Ijun would be number whatever it might be, and then explain why you think that would be the best one. Okay. B, in your group, discuss your ideas for supporting Ijun and gather feedback from your peers. Okay. So all it's asking you to do is ask 2 or 3 other people and put their names in and see what they say. See what they think after having read through these ideas and get them to put in, yes, we agree that number 6 was the best, or yes, we agree that number 2 was the best, or no one in the group agreed on the best approach. We actually think a better approach would be XYZ. Okay, so I'm hoping B has made sense to you. All right, and the group members, they don't have to necessarily be language literacy and numeracy experts. They can just be people that you work with in your RTO or organization. Okay. C, identify cultural or social issues that may have prevented Ijun from asking for help. Okay, so this could be things like shame, it could be losing face, it could be all the different things associated to not understanding or the awkwardness of asking for help. So you may want to Google things like losing face or cultural issues in Asia, things like that. Okay, practical activity 8. Okay, Jason works at Bunnings as an assistant in the plant nursery. As part of his role, Jason is required to mix fertilizers, pesticides and poisons before applying them to plants and in grass around the nursery. Jason has been identified as having specific issues with numeracy, bit of a challenge. He has a great deal of trouble reading the gradients on measuring containers, and so it is possible that he might cause damage to stock if he makes the mixtures too strong. Okay, so Jason is undertaking a study in horticulture. He is hoping to be deemed competent in the unit preparing and applying chemicals, which include the performance criteria. Mixing rates for chemical is defined and calculated. As a trainer in Jason's workplace, what learning support strategies might you provide in order to help Jason continue his job at Bunnings? Okay, so we want to think about what are the different ways that we could support Jason to develop the skills to measure his ingredients. Okay, so that could be things like videos, it could be things like practice activities, it could be things like getting him a pair of glasses. Who knows, it could actually be a visual impairment that he's got. It could be getting him to play with different liquids and just doing a lot of simulated scenarios. Just to put in some thought as to the different strategies that you may use to help Jason out with his inabilities there. After conferring with an LLN advisor, describe the strategies you will use to determine whether or not Jason is competent in this particular unit of competency. Okay, so this could be asking the question simply, how would you know that Jason is now able to complete the task in a competent fashion? And also, are there any other strategies that you could use that an LLN advisor might suggest? Okay. C, explain how this process has changed your understanding of strategies required to support learners with LLN needs. So after going through this scenario with Jason, and after having talked to an LLN advisor, what new thoughts and realizations have you come to about teaching people such as Jason, and particularly how they could handle those challenges in the workplace? Okay, coming down. Practical activity 9. Okay, so this is some emergency evacuation procedures for ABC Training College. Now, if we read through this, we can see that there is a lot of colourful language and a lot of complex language that probably doesn't need to be there. Okay, and we can see that if we don't break this down, it's going to be quite deadly, and it's going to probably put a lot of people in some dangerous scenarios here, because if someone is reading this and they're not actually able to understand the different words that are used in here, probably it's a risk to their safety. Okay, so what we're looking for you to do is essentially break it down into 6 digestible rules or steps to get somebody outside the building. Okay, so if we take a look here, we've got these boxes here, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so we've got 7 steps, excuse me. So we're going to come back up here and we're going to simplify. Okay, so on hearing an evacuation alarm or on instruction of emergency control personnel, immediately cease all activity and secure personal valuables. So if we want to simplify that, we can simplify it down to when alarm rings, stop work. Okay, so I'm hoping you understood what I just did there. Okay, so on hearing evacuation alarm or an instructive emergency control personnel, immediately cease all activity and secure personal valuables. If alarm rings, stop work. Okay, next one, assist any personnel in immediate danger. Well, the word assist is probably a little bit too hard for people, so you may want to change that to help. Okay, and let's see, we've got follow the instructions of relevant emergency services personnel and campus emergency control personnel. That is way too hard for an LLN challenge person. Okay, so for example, you would maybe want to say, meet emergency people in evacuation area. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to go through this information and you're going to break it down into 7 manageable, understandable steps and simplify it as much as you can. Okay, one of my favorite ones to really pick out for this is, in a fire, do not use a lift to evacuate the building. Okay, it's probably stupid to tell someone what they shouldn't do. It would be much better if you actually told them what they should do. So in a fire, use the stairs. Would make a lot more sense to an LLN challenge person. Okay, so you're going to go through and fill out the steps to do that. Okay, now B, identify alternative methods and or ways for adapting These instructions suit an ESL worker, okay? So this could be things like make it a video, simplify the words, turn it into a diagram, translate it into the different languages, all those different kind of things. Okay? Explain how this new procedure better enables workers to perform this task with increased proficiency. So just pick one of them and go, if we made it into a diagram, people would be able to better follow it because they wouldn't need to read all the technical language, that kind of thing. Okay? Practical activity 9C. All right, so now go ahead and use the above modified resource and explain the instructions to a real vocational learner that may be studying in your workplace or within your simulated learning environment. You need to explain it to them in a way that the learner understands it and can repeat it back to you. Please imagine they have oral communication level 1 only. So in here, you're going to put your name, you're going to put the name of the student or someone that you're working with, okay? So just the person that's going to listen to the new steps that you've created, okay? And the title of the session is probably going to be Emergency Evacuation Procedures. Date is the date that you're conducting the session. Location, wherever you're conducting it. And observed by, well, make sure you get it observed by a supervisor or your trainer when you come along to Success Training Academy's face-to-face workshops, okay? Feedback from learner is going to be essentially, how did your learner find the experience? Did they understand all of the steps? And were they clear on exactly what they had to do? Were they able to tell you back the steps that you went through? Okay, practical activity 10. List 3 LLN resources currently available to you within your training organization. So this could be things like simplified manuals. It could be something like translated documents. It could be things like videos. It could be things like an LLN specialist. It could be simplified PowerPoints, all those different kinds of things. B, suggest one method you could use to apply the ACSF more effectively in your role as a trainer or assessor. Explain how this action will improve your training assessment practice. So earlier we talked about this chart. And essentially this chart is the Australian Core Skills Framework, okay? So essentially the question's asking you, how would knowing this chart and this information, how would that help you to improve your training assessment skills, okay? And how could you apply it within your workplace, okay? And I'll get you to think about that in your own time, okay? Practical activity 11, describe 2 processes you will use for evaluating your own training assessment practices in relation to supporting LLN challenge students. Okay, so this could be things like peer reviews. It could be things like feedback from students. It could be things like competency completion rates. It could be things like LLN testing, so pre-course, post-course, things like that. It could be informal observation of students, all those different things. Okay. Practical activity 12. On the next page, attach a printed PowerPoint slide, just one of them, just one. Okay. And what you're going to do is you're going to attach the original version of the PowerPoint slide, and then you are going to attach a redesigned version of the PowerPoint slide in a way that makes it much more simplified, easy to follow, and if an LLN challenge person that had lower reading skills was looking at the slide, would they be able to understand it easily and effortlessly? Okay, so you're going to print out one slide, the original, something that's very text heavy and hard to follow. Then here you're going to attach a redesigned version of it, which is a lot more simplified. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Okay, now go ahead and use the above modified slide to teach one of your vocational learners the content from the slide. Okay, so this slide could contain anything at all related to your industry or your workplace. Okay, now it's going to ask you to actually use the slide. So trainer name is your name, student name is the person you're working with, date is the date that you're doing your session, training topic, whatever the slide relates to, location, wherever you're doing the session, predicted reading level based on ACSF, okay? So the predicted reading level of the student, Feedback from learner regarding how session went. So you're going to get the student to fill that out after they've heard your explanation, your training on the slide that you've shown them. Signature from candidate, get them to sign it. Observed by, you can put in the name of your trainer or a workplace supervisor that you might have. Practical activity 14. Identify one LLN specialist that may operate within your region or local area. Identify their name, contact details, and give a reason as to why you've chosen them as the most appropriate. So what you can do is you can go to LinkedIn and you can type in LLN specialist. Or you can go to Google and type in LLN specialist Melbourne, LLN specialist Brisbane, and see what comes up, because guaranteed you're going to find a number of people that have their websites and advertise themselves as LLN specialists. Also, you can go to, for example, government organisations such as the Reading Writing Hotline, and you can look up different services that people may be able to access for reading and writing skills. Okay, so I'm hoping that question's made sense for you. All right, practical activity 15. What questions would you ask your learner to determine if your learning support was sufficient? So it could be questions like, where do you feel that you are improving? It could be, what words are you still struggling with? It could be, what other ways could we support you even better? It could be, what areas of the course are you still struggling in? It could be, what new words have you come across since starting the course? It could be, in the assessments, are there any areas you are finding major difficulties? Okay. Those kind of questions are really going to help you understand what further support could be required, if at all. Okay. Practical activity 16. What process could you go through to evaluate the success of your learning, support, and assessment strategies within your organisation? So essentially the question's asking you, how would you know that your support strategies are working or not? Okay, and what evaluation systems might you use? Okay, so number one could be, we will have pre and post course testing. Okay, we will have informal observation. Okay, we will have an LLN specialist that observes our classes. Okay, we will have informal conversation with our LLN challenge people. Okay, just have a think about how would you know if the support you are providing is working or not. Okay. Practical activity 17, based on your personal reflection, which areas of LLN do you think you find the hardest to support? Okay, so we've got easiest to hardest. So for example, in my case, I find the easiest to support is definitely learning. Next easiest to support, next hardest to support would probably be reading. Next easiest to support would be writing. Next easiest to support would be oral. And the least of all, the hardest to support for me would be numeracy. Okay, so you're just going to put them in order of the least to the hardest for you to support. Now, the next question, though, is asking you, based on the above, what strategies or extra resources would you access to be able to better support people that may have a deficiency in your lowest area of confidence? So, for example, for me, the area that I have the least confidence to support someone in would definitely be numeracy. So in here, I'm going to say, in order to support someone with numeracy, I need to find a lot more websites that can help people with numeracy. These could be the following websites. So it'll list out 2 or 3 websites that I could direct people to. Okay. Practical activity 19. Okay, so part A. It has been identified that 2 of your students in your class are LLN challenged. One of them has difficulty with reading and writing. So that's going to be student 1, reading and writing. Student 2 has difficulties with oral communication and following basic instructions. Both students are required to undertake assessment for the unit Conduct Manual Handling. Knowing the above scenario, how will you endeavour to assess them and accommodate for their needs in each case? Okay, so student 1 there has challenges with reading and writing. So probably it's not a good idea to give them a written test. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. Okay. And student 2 has problems with listening to basic instructions. So we need to think about, if we were going to get them to do an observation or a practical task, how would we change that so that they could still understand it? Okay, so I'm not going to give you the answers on this, but essentially they are being tested on conducting manual handling. So essentially moving items around a room. And one has problems with reading and writing, the other one has problems with following basic instructions. So how would you change up the assessment methods so that they could still have a fair go at it? Okay, so see how you go with that question. Part B. Now share your assessment strategy with a colleague and ask them for their feedback on how effective your adjusted strategies might be. Make sure any pitfalls are identified and areas of enhancement. Okay, so you're going to sit down with your colleague or sit down with your trainer and say, well, based on the above scenario, I would change it to be this way, and my reason for it is this. And what do you think? Do you think I've got a justifiable case here? And do you think this would be the best way to handle it? Okay, and get their feedback. All right, and that, folks, is essentially the end of the assessment workbook for the Language Literacy and Numeracy unit. If you have any questions, any problems at all, feel free to give the office a call and they will put you through to a trainer that can help you out answer these questions in even more detail. Ultimately, there is no right or wrong answer in language literacy and numeracy, but you need to be able to justify your answer. Also, your answers do need to be in a complete sentence. Okay, so where required, do put it into a sentence. Okay. In terms of assessment submission, make sure that you send it electronically via email, or you simply print it out and that you post it to the address that is on our website, and you will find the address in the instructions here, and you will also find it on the Success Training Academy website. Otherwise, you may be able to ask the office that you enrolled with at the time. Okay, so if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out. But I hope this webinar has been helpful in helping you understand the requirements of the Language Literacy and Numeracy unit. Okay, thanks so much for watching the webinar, and good luck with your assessment.